splinter fringe from Christianity. And in the process, I argue that in here as well, it has abandoned the key issue of all of Judeo-Christian tradition. It is not Christian. That's another thing you can tell them. What you're saying is not Christian. Why? It's a question of history. Realize how important history is to Judaism and Christianity. People from the East pick up our Bible and read it, and they say, what does this have to do with religion and spirituality? Did you ever read some of it? The stuff that's in it, it's incredible. Most of it's history. Why? The point was God works in history. Jesus came as God in history. Well, if God really spoke in history, you're not going to understand it about God unless you know the history. What I just did. They have eliminated the whole historical element from the religion. That is no longer Jewish or Christian. It's a new religion. Buddhism grew out of Hinduism. It's a new religion. Mohammedanism grew out of Judaism and Christianity. It's a new religion. Mormonism grew out of Christianity and whatever else it grew out of. It's a very peculiar system. It is not Christian. I'm sorry if there's some. I know that the Mormons want to insist that they're still Christian. I don't think they're not consistent with the tradition. There are deviations, and I say that the fundamentalist movement is no longer. It has violated one of the essences of the whole insistence that life is what it is about, living here and now. God is working here and now. Trust your mind. Trust the goodness of your heart. That's God speaking to you. The Holy Spirit has been poured into your heart. You know all those quotes? It's about you. How do you know that He is God? Jesus came in the flesh. Read 1 John. He keeps insisting, Jesus in the flesh. Not some spiritual out there thing. So that's fundamentalist. It's a very recent splinter group.
And so much is based on that last 100 years.
And the reason it's happening, to be compassionate about it, we are living in incredibly difficult times. You know that. The bombings, the terrorisms, the conflict of cultures, that we're trying to put together a global society, and because of religion we're killing each other. The whole of science, I mean, if you know anything about science and where it's at today, who can even know what, I mean, it's gotten so far out, there's no consensus on whether it's true or just fantasy. And many people think truth is what you believe it is. I remember reading when I was in San Antonio, somebody had scribbled above the urinal, there is no wrong except what you believe to be. And I thought, gee, so you go out and have sex and get AIDS. That's just your fantasy, isn't it? Now, there are consequences living in this world. It's set up that way. There are certain limits. You can go so far. We have a tremendous amount of leeway we've been given by the Creator. But you can't, there are certain boundaries, and it's just going to flip back all the time. The consequences will be paid in the end. Actions have consequences, and they're going to be paid. It's not that you make it whatever you want it to be. But you use your intelligence as well as you can to understand how it really functions and flow with it. That's spiritual growth. You're moving with the flow, and that's why you have power. That's why the guy in Star Wars can look at it and say, you remember the scene where they're going into the city and who is the, I forget his name, but the guard doesn't want to let them go, and he looks and says, you have no reason to keep us, you will let us pass. This mental power. Why? I think that's exaggerated, but it's a sense if you're in the flow of the universe, you have power because you're moving with the flow rather than working against it.
I have a question. Why are mainstream Protestant churches unwilling to look at the scriptures from your perspective?
As I said, they do. They all do, but they can't afford to say what I'm saying. There are people in the gay movement who don't want me to be saying what I'm saying because it's disruptive. We're trying to be politically correct. We don't, we have to use little sound bites. We don't want people to be disturbed. And for me to say that this whole fundamentalist thing is not Christian, it's political. And it's not bad. We have to live together. And this is hard to say when we're dying on the streets because of our situation. But if you think of the world, how many people, millions, have died in swamps and forests and villages and cities because of the abuse of others and political powers? We're just part of what's been going on in history the whole time. And we want it now. But you can't change society like overnight. And these churches are splintered down the middle. And the ministers know this stuff, but they can't afford to preach it. And so quietly they work underneath and set up study groups and try to get a consensus going and hope that only 1/3 of the church will leave when they take a new position. We're in difficult times, really difficult times.
What can someone, say maybe like a grown adult that has children and they want to come out to their children or young teenagers, what would your recommendation be, or how would they go about actually like making those children or helping those children understand what you're saying tonight when they've been saturated with the other for their entire life? How would they go about like having that conversation?
The difficulty is that it depends on how they were brought up.
Well, if they were brought up, very much like what you're talking about, very strict,
then
and
it's very difficult to change it.
how would they?
Be a quiet, slow process of saying, well, I wonder about that, and let's think about. If children are brought up lovingly and open and accepting, the changes work easily. But if not, it needs a slow, gentle process, because those kids are at a very precarious point in life. Teenage years are very, very difficult. And you do it lovingly and supportingly and bit by bit. And sometimes we have to surrender our wants and put it off for a year or 2 or 3 for the sake of the greater good. You can see I'm not just a reckless, lascivious, you do whatever you want. If the scriptures don't condemn it, that doesn't mean you go out in the streets and anybody you come across. Have sex with anyone you come across. No, there are ways. There are kind ways and loving ways to share intimacy with one another. And that builds up. And sometimes you can't. People have obligations. People have other situations. You're not going to violate their promises. That's noble. That's the only way to live. And sometimes for the sake of the kids, it's not always the best. You stay together for the sake of the kids till they're old enough to. There's no easy way. I hope that helps some.
Yeah. Are there any like specific scriptures that they can? Maybe, I know you have a lot, and my friend actually has your book and is looking at it tonight.
Naomi's story seems clearly to be a lesbian relationship. Jonathan and David and Saul. Now there's new research. There's a brand new book come out on Saul. There was Saul and Michal, Jonathan's sister, and Jonathan and David, and all 4 of them were entwined in sexual kinds of stuff. I mean, David married Michelle, I think her name was, or Michael. But they had relationships going on the other side. And all that stuff has been suppressed. I mean, they translated it. Hebrew's ambiguous. It doesn't have vowels. Do you know that? Hebrew only has consonants. So you see BD. Does that mean bed or bad or bid? Well, in Hebrew, it can mean any of them. And now they're trying to change the vowels and see what it says, and it's just astounding. David and Jonathan's a story, it seems, of love between 2 men.
David and Jonathan's story.
Jesus and there's no easy way to do it. Jesus and the disciple he loved. There's a book by Theodore Jennings called The Man Jesus Loved. People have said this before too, just making arguments. This guy gives what I find a credible argument that Jesus very well could have been gay and involved with John, the disciple, the beloved disciple, and his crew knew it, and this was the new thing that they were opening up. Let's get rid of these taboos, let's let people love, and that's part of why Jesus probably got killed. He was challenging the status quo of the society much too much, just like we today are challenging the status quo of society. Read the scriptures on love and forgiveness and tolerance. And the foot can't say to the hand, I don't need you, because we're all part of one. Oh, somebody here.
Let's say at the beginning of the Bible, first in Genesis, we had Adam and Eve, and then moving on later on, I can't remember where it is, be fruitful and multiply later on. It says not just fill your seed, so isn't the Bible kind of like saying that men need to be with women to multiply and that's the natural way of doing it, and that's like dishes and stuff that.
Well, a number of things. First,